Eric Weinstein said he doesn't know if the rules-based international order will allow Trump to become president. What do you think of that?
I mean, I'm always sort of skeptical of, what that means, what the order means. I like more specificity in those sorts of allegations. Like, who are these people so we can fight them? I don't like sort of vague, shadowy forces that are systemic racism, right? Like, who are you blaming? What do you mean? The rules-based international order. Who specifically are we talking about that is going to, and how? And what's the mechanism of control?
I really appreciate the fact that you seem to very rarely lean into conspiracism. It seems that a lot of the explanations that you give for why things are happening are out there in front in some form or another. They're sort of tangible. I can touch them. It's not this sort of up there in the ether. And yet that has become very much a signature of some areas of the right as well.
For sure. And it's something, again, I think that leads to a breakdown in politics, because if you believe that there are these vague conspiratorial forces that are at the center of all things, and then you lose, well, then you can't really accept the loss. And if you win, you have to use your power in order to crush those vague conspiratorial forces that you can't actually describe or name. And so politics becomes a little bit of blood sport at that point. Again, I'm not saying there aren't conspiracies, but I'd like to see some evidence of them so that we can all identify them together and then fight them. So, for example, I think that it's not a conspiracy so much as it is a large-scale agreement among legacy members of the media on politics. That happens to be a truth. The legacy media agree in very wide scale on politics. Do they get together in a back room and decide a narrative? No, they just start mirroring each other like you would in a social club, because that's actually how it works. Is that something that needs to be fought in terms of the informational dissemination? Sure. Is it a conspiracy when the algorithms are set at Facebook or YouTube or old X before Elon? Is that a conspiracy when they set these things certain ways? It's not a conspiracy. It's someone who actually, it's like Jack Dorsey, who's actually pulling a lever and saying you shouldn't do this. And I can fight that because I know that Jack Dorsey is pulling the lever. What I don't like is stuff like the rules-based international order is going to stop Donald Trump from being president, because I don't know what I'm supposed to fight at that point. How do I stop that from happening? And isn't that an unverifiable hypothesis that you
would that not be the purposeful byproduct of such an order like that it's very difficult to define and we're going to stay in the shadows? It's sort of endemic to their very mode of operating.
I mean, sure. I mean, that's the counter argument. But again, my problem is it's unfalsifiable. So once you posit a hypothesis that's unfalsifiable, it makes it very, very difficult for me to either fight it or to disagree with you, because you can always move into it's a Mott and Bailey argument. You just move right back into the next level of the conspiracy. So instead of me saying, so for example, at the 2020 election, I've said, I think that there were people who informally rigged the election in the sense that the media totally agreed that Donald Trump should not be president. They decided to promote certain narratives, to deny certain other narratives, to, for example, push with members of the government to hide the Hunter Biden laptop story. Like, there are obviously factors, change the voting rules, but those are all very specific things I'm naming right now, right? The media, social media downplayed a story. Okay, we know what that is, and we can have congressional hearings about it. That there were changes to the rules in places like Pennsylvania. We know exactly what that is, and we can try to win back the legislature to actually change the voting rules in Pennsylvania to prevent that sort of stuff. Right? These are specific things. What I don't like is when people will say the election was rigged, and what they mean is that there was mass voter fraud. And I'll say,
spooky
okay, well,
coordination.
Right, exactly. Like people bring in boxes. And then you'll say, okay, well, I need the evidence that people are bringing in boxes. I'll say, well, but that's the whole point. The evidence doesn't exist. Okay, well, now we're arguing with shadows. Maybe you're right. I mean, you could be right. I have no evidence that you're right, but I also have no evidence that you're wrong. So, I mean, how am I supposed to even adjudicate what to do next?
So do you sort of purposefully avoid the deep state coordination conspiracy thing and just, that's an area that I'm not going to bother debating. That's maybe some other people can try and work that stuff out.
I mean, usually what I do is I wait for the evidence to emerge. So sometimes it feels like I'm late on the ball because of that, right? We live in such a fast-paced media environment that there's a weird math that applies in political media. And the math is that if I jump first 100 times and I'm wrong 98 of those times, but 2 of those times I'm right, I'm now a credible source. If I'm the second person on the ball because I'm waiting to see the evidence emerge for this thing and I'm right like 98 times, but I'm wrong 2 times, then I'm no longer trustworthy. Better to be first and wrong 98% of the time, but right those 2, because now you're a prophet.
Yeah.
Right. Now you get to say, exactly. Now you get to say, that Alex Jones is a prophet because of all the weird and crazy things that he says. Like 2 times he was like right on it. Like, wow, that's amazing. Okay. Well, that also used to just be called a scam. Okay. Like,
where does that seduction come from?
The necessity for immediate answers. social media has made it so that you want like answers right. And people always wanted answers, but now you feel like you have the mechanism of getting an answer right away, and you get frustrated if people don't give you an answer right away.
Yeah, you prefer an immediate wrong answer than a delayed correct one.
Especially if it backs your priors, right? If the immediate answer that comes back at you is what you wanted to hear, which is that your candidate of choice, whether right or left, this applies on both sides, that your candidate of choice definitely didn't lose. They actually won, and they were jobbed out of it. And you're outraged. You didn't want your candidate to lose. You're really pissed that your candidate lost. And then, you have a choice between somebody who says, absolutely, he was jobbed out of it. There are people who are coming in the middle of the night, and they were bringing in boxes of ballots, and they were shoving them through the machines, and he actually won, and it's all being rigged, and the red wave was real, but then it was jobbed out. Like, that's a much more interesting and seductive answer than me saying, you know what, I'm perfectly willing to hear the case. I need to see the actual evidence flow in, and then as it comes in, and if you can prove that to me, then I'm perfectly willing to have you make that argument. But I don't have the evidence at this point to actually say that. Right? One is a sexier answer, and even if it turns out being wrong, there's no punishment for it. Because either you don't acknowledge that you were wrong, you just keep playing the game. I mean, we're 4 years later, and depending on and it's a wide variety of conspiracy theories. I feel the same way about COVID. Okay, I tried to wait for data to emerge. That meant that I got some things wrong. Then there were people who jumped one way or another. Okay, there are some people who jumped to, we need a lockdown permanently, and then we'll just do that for 3 years. And then there were some people who jumped to, vaccines will immediately be bad, they will be terrible, and we don't need to do anything about COVID. We should basically just let it free flow through the population. Well, it turns out the second was probably closer to the truth in many circumstances, but I didn't have the evidence of any of that sort of stuff. So I had to wait for those things. And what that means is that sometimes I will have to apologize on the air for having gotten it wrong because I waited for the data and I made a judgment in the absence of data that I then have to walk back because the data have arrived, right? Most famously, this happened with me with regard to the vaccine. So in late 2020, Pfizer and the federal government under Donald Trump announced that the vaccines were 99% effective in preventing transmission, not death, transmission. Right. And the case that I made at that point was, listen, I'm healthy, I'm young, I don't really need it, but I have parents. My parents were in their 60s and they were basically bubbled with us. We weren't bubbled at that time, but we're out and about. And if I can prevent my parents from getting it by getting the vaccine, fine, I'll get the vaccine. And so I said that. Right. And I said, like, a lot of the talk about how the vaccines are ineffective, I don't know what data you're basing that on. And then it turns out that Pfizer was basically lying, that they had no actual data on transmission, and they were making claims in the absence of the data. Well, when that happens, then I have to come out and I have to say I was too credulous. But the counter to that, the other sort of possibility is people who are so skeptical of everything or selectively skeptical that, it's unclear when they're right and when they're wrong. What I would hope is to live in a media environment where when I'm wrong, I admit that I got it wrong. And when other people are wrong, they admit that they got it wrong. But that's not the environment we live in.
Yeah, it's one of my least favorite dynamics that somebody publicly changing their mind is seen as a mark of fickleness, not a mark of intelligence. Like, I don't know, it seems to me that a stupid person's idea of being smart is being unwavering, but that, in my experience, doesn't seem to be the case.
It's one thing to be unwavering on your principles. It's another thing to be unwavering on the data. Right? Sometimes the data just change, right? Like there's new data, or it turns out the old data were never based on anything. And at that point, if the data changed, then my opinion on the policy changes. If it turns out that the policy that I've been promoting turns out to be a giant failure, I mean, by the way, no good business would operate on this, right? If my business were pouring money down a rat hole and just kept pouring money down the rat hole no matter what, because, got to make sure that we're consistent on this, then we'd lose. And that's not, in no other area of your life do you act like this, but when it comes to politics, then you're supposed to be unwaveringly in favor of the original position that you took, regardless of the data that emerges about that position.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it with family, you wouldn't do it with friends, you wouldn't do it with your business.
It's like a show of fealty or whatever, sort of loyalty to your own side, and you're seen as an unreliable ally if you're somebody that does change their mind in retrospect, which I really don't like. Trust really is everything when it comes to supplements. A lot of brands may say that they're top quality, but few can actually prove it, which is why I partnered with Momentous. They make the highest quality supplements on the planet. They're literally unparalleled when it comes to rigorous third-party testing. What you read on the label is what's in the product and absolutely nothing else. 3 of the products that I use to support my brain, body, and sleep are omega-3, tonkat Ali, and magnesium L-threonate to support cognitive performance, optimal hormone function, and better sleep. And Dr. Andrew Huberman is the scientific advisor for Momentous. So if you've ever wondered what supplements he would create or what he really uses himself, this is the answer. Best of all, they ship internationally and offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're not sure, you can buy them, try them for 29 days, and if you do not like them, they will give you your money back. Right now, you can head to the link in the description below or go to livemomentous.com/modernwisdom and use the code modernwisdom at checkout to get 20% off everything site-wide. That's livemomentous.com/modernwisdom and modern wisdom. at checkout. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip with Ben, you'll love the full-length 2-hour-long podcast, which you can watch right here. Go on. Tap it.